Sometimes it gets a little late, sometimes it gets earlier, like today, but around 8 or so, a little before, a little after, is when I am here on live. So sometimes it's meditations and sometimes it's books. So today, what I have with me, since I did a meditation yesterday or sometime in the afternoon, I thought let's try a book. And I do have a new one here, which is a Forest Enchantments. It's by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, who's a very talented writer in Indian writing. One of the most strikingly lyrical voices writing about the lives of Indian women, as Amitav Ghosh has said. And what occurred today when I was alone in the darkness under the sorrow tree? You don't know. You don't know my despair. You don't even know my exhilaration, how it felt. First in the forest and then in Ayodhya when I was the most beloved woman in creation. The Ramayana, one of the world's greatest epics, is also a tragic love story. In this brilliant retelling, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni places Sita at the center of the novel. So this is Sita's version, The Forest of Enchantments. It's also a very human story of some of the other women in the epic, often misunderstood and relegated to the margins. There's Kekeyi, there's Suparnaka, there's Mandodari. So there's a very powerful comment on duty, betrayal, infidelity, and honor, and it is about women's struggle to retain autonomy in a world that privileges men, as Chitra transforms an ancient story into a gripping contemporary battle of wills. So, while the Ramayana resonates even today, she makes it more relevant than ever in the underlying questions in the novel. How should women be treated by their loved ones? So, what are their rights in a relationship? When does a woman need to stand up and say enough? So, as Vaya put it, this is the Sitayana that we will give to our daughters. The pun there and the wordplay there on Ramayan. It is a Sitayan that we will give to our daughters, that they may imbibe Sita's strength, and even more proudly to our sons, who will learn how a woman is to be treated. Divarakuni's Sita is a multifaceted personality who will find resonance in today's times, as the Tribune put it. I personally agree now, because today's women are quite different from what we were. We were progressive thinking, we had our careers in mind, all of that, but we were also ready to settle in to household uh, duties. Today's girls are a little more career oriented, I guess. While some are homely and like their families, their careers and jobs or sometimes take precedence in their minds. So, an incomparable storyteller is the Denver Post. The Varakuni stories are irresistible, as the New York Times Book Review put it. So, let's see other things about this. There is a lot of praise for this Forest of Enchantments. Volga has said that Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni's Sita is an epitome of courage and self-respect, showing a path for all women while weaving a familiar story. Chitra provides deep and surprising insights. Now, the Forest of Enchantments and Chitralekha Banerjee Divakaruni, who's the author. So, we are having something here to my three men, as she has dedicated the book to, Murthy, Anand, Abhay and all, for teaching me love. So, as the author's note says, 10 years ago, after I published The Palace of Illusions, my novel on the Mahabharata was told in the voice of Panchali. So many readers ask me what I would write about next. After The Palace of Illusions was published, it was about Panchali, the Draupadi, and it was in the about the Mahabharata. So what would I write next is what these authors asked. Where she's telling us, the author, in her note here, author's note. Usually, that's a question to which I have no answer, not for many months. I'm the kind of writer whose imagination must lie fallow for a while before it can come up with a topic into which I can throw myself body and soul. This time I had my answer already. I'm going to write the story of Sita, I said, because I've always been fascinated by the Ramayana. So just like Panchali, my Sita, yes, with the presumptuous intimacy of authors, I thought of her as mine, will tell her own tale. So she'll fill in the gaps between the adventures undertaken by the male characters of the epic, their victories, defeats, and she'll tell us what inspired the crucial choices that directed the course of her life. So, what she believed in, what interested and moved her, how she felt when faced with the deepest of tragedies, and what gave her the ability to overcome them. So, people thought it was a great idea. How long will it take? They asked. Maybe 2 to 3 years, I said blithely. I've already started on the research. We'll be waiting eagerly for it, people said. So 2 years passed, then 3, then 5, then 7. But my Sita's novel didn't get written. So I wrote other books, contemporary novels, which are set in India and America, and then they featured also complicated women protagonists, some strong-willed, some uh, others downright stubborn, making waves wherever they went and suffering the consequences. I admire these heroines, and I thought of them as being very different from Sita. Wasn't she, after all, good and meek and long suffering, bearing her fortunes with silent stoicism, the way the perfect uh, Indian woman was supposed to? So, wasn't that why, when our elders blessed us, they said, may you be like Sita? And wasn't that why that statement always angered me? So the truth was, I didn't know how to write Sita's story. I wrote the other books because they were easier and because I was afraid of tackling what I knew deep down to be the most challenging project of my life. But I couldn't give up on her either. So Sita's story haunted me because it was one of the first stories I was told, because I sensed there was a disconnect between the truth of Sita and the way Indian popular culture thought of her. I sensed that Sita was more than what we took her to be, and who she was, didn't yet know. Then, suddenly, a dear family member had to be rushed to the hospital, and as I waited for by his bed in the ICU, the lesson that life is brief and fragile was brought home to me as never before. Because by the time we got home, by the time we got home, the incident had changed me. I knew I had no time to lose. I dropped my long resistance. I returned to the research I was doing with a new urgency. I read the Valmiki Ramayana, the Adbhuta Ramayana, the Kamba Ramayana, and also my favorite, the Bengali Kritibhasi Ramayana from the 15th century. I discovered folk songs about Sita, or those addressed to her. I realized there were so many portraits of her, each different in a significant way. It gave me the courage, therefore, to write my own version. The pictures will differ of her all over the place, and why not write about her also in her own way, her own version of what she perceived her to be, was what the author was thinking. So, as I researched and meditated on my findings, I realized three important things. One is that Sita may be the incarnation of the goddess Lakshmi, but having taken on a mortal body, she is human too, with human feelings. So, as is Ram, the Ramayana is filled with instances of their human emotions. So, they love, they grow angry or confused, they weep sometimes, they miss each other to the point of heartbreak, they are afraid. They even joke about things. Sometimes Sita longs for what she says, something she can't have. Even jokes about things is what they've said here. So that is the others in the Ramayana. So some the characters. So sometimes Sita longs for what she can't have, or even what's bad for her. Sometimes, like all of us, she says at a crucial moment, he can't say no to her, even though he should. This is how Ram loves Sita so much, because he always says yes to all her needs. So at other moments, he cares too much about what his subjects will think of him. He's so worried about that sometimes. So he becomes hostage to his desire to be the perfect king. This is what leads him into an action which will break his heart as well as his beloved. Next, we see another thing, which is number 2, that Sita in the Ramayana, Sita's choices and Sita's reactions stem from what is courage. Though often it is a quiet courage, so it is easy to mistake for meekness. It is a courage of endurance, of moving forward in spite of obstacles, of never giving in. It is a courage that has been reflected for centuries in the lives of women. So hers, Sita's, is a courage that speaks its mind. It speaks its mind at vital points in her journey. So no matter what the cost, just as Indian women are now doing. In the final amazing and heartbreaking moments of her life, Sita demonstrates this courage that refuses to compromise no matter how much is at stake. So number 3 point here is that the story of Sita and Ram is one of the greatest, one of the most tragic love stories, not just in our Indian culture, but in the world. So there was a time when I believed that in order to care for Sita, the reader must end up hating Ram. But that is too simplistic. As I wrote The Forest of Enchantments, the novel became what is a meditation on the nature of love. So I hope that while focusing on the many wonderful, exciting and surprising layers to Sita's character, I've simultaneously been able to portray Ram as a complex being that he is. So he is a noble, he is whatnot, he is noble, he is earnest, he is devoted to his wife, but best by challenges of his own and beset by challenges of his own and forced to choose between his public role of being a king and his private role as a husband and lover. So as I send the Forest of Enchantments out into the world, I ask for the benediction of Sita, goddess, daughter, sister, lover, warrior, mother, and a role model for women all over the world. I pray that the novel lodges deep into the hearts of readers, regardless of their genders, for Sita's role has much in it to inspire and console us all. Finally, I hope it will bring us all new meaning to that old blessing. May you like Sita. The next thing is about the prelude that you have to give a prelude. This is a must. And then only finally we'll step into the next chapter. So prelude itself sometimes becomes the starting point of the story where the author is talking. Shall we see that too? I suppose there's time and we can do that. So in this prelude, like I said, 2 days ago, the sage handed me the tome that he had been composing for decades. It's my life work, he said, and a strange look flashed across his face. I wouldn't have expected that. It was part shyness, a past given to me for my desire for approbation. But why should the great Valmiki want approval from me? A queen bereft of her kingdom, a wife rejected by a husband at the heir of his glory. I have come to Valmiki's enemies who have lost everything, and they are not in debt anymore. They are here for the refuge that he's given me at that crucial moment. I'd like you to be the first to read it, he said, before I give it to your sons to sing. After all, it is your story too. So, shall we do the prelude then? Which is actually here seems to be the first chapter itself. Maybe we could do that. No, it's not the first chapter, it is the prelude only here. Okay, so here's prelude for you. 2 days ago, the sage handed me the tome that he had been composing for decades. It's my life work, he said, and a strange look flashed across his face, one that I wouldn't have expected. It was part shyness and it was part desire for approbation. But why should the great Valmiki want approval from me, a queen bereft of her kingdom, a wife rejected by her husband at the height of his glory? I had come to Valmiki's hermitage having lost everything except the babies that I carried inside me. I was forever in his debt for the refuge that he had given me at that most crucial moment. I'd like you to be the first to read it, he said, before I give it to your sons to sing. After all, it is your story too. I glanced down at the palm leaves in my arms, a hefty stack reaching higher than my heart, and a shudder went through me. Sorrow and longing and fury and love, as I saw the title Ramayan, the story of the glorious King Ram, my husband. I stayed up through the night and the next night in my thatched hut at the edge of the ashram reading. The oil in the lamps burned away without my noticing. In the next room, my 14-year-old sons awoke at the smell of scorched wicks and came to ensure that I was safe. Love, always protective of me, took me by the shoulders and said, "You must sleep or you'll make yourself ill. What's so urgent that it can't wait until morning?" But Kush, the perceptive one, touched the dried salt on my cheek with a gentle finger and said, wonderingly, for it had been years since they had seen me so distraught, "Ma, why are you weeping?" I kissed their heads, my boys balanced on the precarious edge of manhood, and sent them back to their beds with words of assurance. But I didn't lie down. Morning came, wind whispered in the trees, mango, coconut, jackfruit, all of that was there. The things that plants I had planted, in fact, along the edges of the ashram in the early years. And that is when I needed work to distract me from my grief. It was on the river bank that I heard the voices of these ashram dwellers greeting the sun with the purest notes were those of my sons, for they were adept at both weaponry and song. I waited until the assembly was dispersed, each to his or her task, and then I took the manuscript back to Valmiki. The sage looked at me curious. "It's very good," I said. "The poetry is superb, the descriptions sublime, the rhythm perfect. You've captured the histories of earth and heaven both, the adventures and the wars, the weddings and the deaths, the betrayals and the farewells, the palace and the forest. But," I said, and I couldn't keep the anger from my voice, "what occurred when I was alone in the darkness, under the sorrow tree? You don't know my despair. You don't even know my exhilaration. How it felt, first in the forest, then in Ayodhya, when I was the most beloved woman in creation. I wrote what the divine vision showed me," he said. It must have been a god that brought it to you then, not a goddess, I said dryly, for you haven't understood a woman's life. The heartbreak at the core of her joys, her unexpected alliances and desires, her negotiations where, in the hope of keeping one treasure safe, she must give up another. I expected anger, for he had lavished a lifetime on this book. But not for nothing is he called a Maharishi, a great sage. You must write that story yourself, Ma, he said, for only you know it. He took out a new sheaf of the pounded leaves, a set of quills, items precious and hard to come by in our forest retreat. He called to an apprentice to carry his writing table to my room. He rummaged in a chest and handed me a sealed bottle of ink. Hurry, he said, time grows short. I walked to my room, shaky with possibility and trepidation. Time was indeed short. All these years, my husband, yes, to my chagrin, I still thought of him as such, had left me alone to raise my sons, allowing me, if not happiness, at least a tenuous peace. But now the planets were shifting. Everything was about to change again. I barred the door and sat cross-legged on the ground and arranged the palm leaves on the table. Outside, I could hear Valmiki teaching my sons how to sing the epic, where to raise their sweet silver voices in affirmation, where to whisper dark and shiveringly of the treachery of Rakshasas, of human feelings. They'll be performing him soon if his vision was true, and I both feared and hoped that it was in front of Ram, the king of Ayodhya, the father they had never met. The man who had banished them to the forest for no fault of their own, even before they were born. If Valmiki's vision was true, soon I would be facing him. Ram, monarch, father, warrior, husband, the beloved who abandoned me when I needed him most, my greatest joy and my greatest despair. But I had a task to complete before that. I took a deep breath and touched the first palm leaf to my forehead, invoking Saraswati, goddess of creativity, serene on her white swan, though a part of me wondered what she could know of my very human tribulations. I unplugged the inkpot and was startled to see the color the sage had chosen for me, red. But of course, how else could I write my story except in the color of menstruation and childbirth, the color of the marriage mark that changes women's lives, the color of the flowers of the Ashoka tree, under which I had spent my years of captivity in the palace of a demon king. I picked up the quill and closed my eyes. I knew what I must do, travel back to the beginning, to the moment I met Ram, become again the girl I had been on that day, burnished with innocence, believing that goodness and love were armor enough. That was where I had to start. But as I dipped my quill into the ink pot, there rose inside me voices, some clamoring, some tentative, some whispering. So then I had to still my breath to hear them. Kaikeyi, second queen of Ayodhya, who wrested our throne from us out of blind devotion to her son, only to be hated by him for it. Ahalya, her beauty turned to stone by her husband's jealous fury. Suparnaka, wild enchantress of the forest, whose gravest crime was to desire the wrong man. Mandodari, wife to the legendary demon king, forced to watch her kingdom fall into ruin and her beloved son perish because of her husband's obsession with another woman. Urmila, my sweet sister, the forgotten one, the one I had left behind as I set off with blithe ignorance on my forest adventure with my husband. Write our story too, for always we have been pushed into corners, trivialized, misunderstood, blamed, forgotten, or maligned, and used as cautionary tales. Yes, I said to them. Yes, I'll write your stories as best as I can, for without them, mine can't be complete. I set quill to leaf. In red ink, I began to write in crooked, effortless lettering because it had been so long since I had composed anything. The Sitayan. now we'll do chapter 1 as well, because it's just so amazing. The summaries of this will be available to you as private links, as in when you get in touch with me at my email, which is saritamwariyer@gmail.com, all small capital letters. You can also WhatsApp me at 9061431 using the country code +91 for India. So, chapter 1. Let's do that and then we'll end it. Remember, we can do book summaries later. We can do excerpts from this and explanations on that. Quotes also similarly done. MCQs with answers, book discussion questions, and a lot more. So, chapter 1. The day that was to change my life started like any other. I walked through the extensive gardens of my father, King Janak, reveling in the feel of the soft grass, beaded with the dews of dawn on my bare feet. I was accompanied by the chief gardeners, for I was the overseer of the palace arbors, an unusual duty for a princess. They pointed out problems that they have been unable to solve. A gnarled champak refusing to flower, a rare shringar, shriveling up no matter what they tried, a copse of bamboos with black rot creeping up their stalks. I stroked leaves, dug around roots, breathed praise. Behind me, I could hear the odd whispers of the gardeners. Amazing, miraculous. Look, that they're already healing. I tell you, she's the earth goddess herself, appeared straight out of the ground just to bless us. They exaggerated, of course, and though I could see, told them clearly that I'm human just like them, their veneration seemed to increase every year. All this was because of how my father found me. Yes, found. Though by virtue of my upbringing, I was a princess, Sita, eldest daughter, the house of Mithila, in the kingdom of Vaideha. No one knew who I was by birth. Father told us the story many times. It was one of my favorites, and my sister Urmila's as well. The morning I was found, he had gone to till the field beside the palace to level it for a yagna that was to occur soon. He was fond of holy ceremonies. He liked to participate in their preparation. If destiny hadn't placed upon him the duty of governing his people, he would have been very happy to spend all his time at the feet of a rishi, listening to a treatise on the nature of the supreme reality. That day, however, only a few steps into his plowing, he was forced to a standstill. A baby lay in his path, naked and newborn, glistening in the young sun as though it was a mirage. He was amazed that I didn't cry, regarding him instead with unblinking eyes. I kicked off the cloth that swaddled me, a gold fabric finer than anything our Mithila weavers could produce, with strange and intricate designs, the likes of which no one had ever seen. Believers said the gods had gifted me to the good king who was childless in spite of years of efforts. Skeptics wondered which cunning person had placed me there at just the right moment to be discovered by Janak. It must be someone who knew my unworldly father well, they whispered. Other kings would have had the child removed without considering her fate. At best, they would have ordered for her to be brought up in a servant's home. But my saintly father picked me up and held me to his chest. As he did so, a great hunger within him was assuaged, and he was at peace. So, here it is. This was my first lesson on the nature of love. That in a moment it could fulfill the cravings of a lifetime, like a light that someone might shine into a cavern that had been dark for 1,000,000 years. The power of love. It fascinated me from an early age. I thought about it often, even though I didn't quite understand what it was. My strange gift with plants was a mystery to me, perhaps because I liked them. Because, like them, I was earthborn. Maybe for the same reason, when I touched a plant, I knew its healing properties. I could tell which grasses cured headaches and colds, which seeds fended off infections, which herbs to give women when their monthly blood flowed too long, and which potions healed the shaking sickness or gladdened a long depressed heart. And so, after my garden walk, I made my way to my other responsibility, the healing house. It was adjoining. Who was more concerned than delighted, tried to keep my skill a secret. But news traveled. Soon, people suffering from diseases deemed incurable would drag themselves across the country to the capital, begging to see me. They needed a place to stay, and finally, my mother, accepting defeat, built the healing house. Today, I examined many of the sick. I instructed the physicians on the administration of the unguents and potions. Finally, I moved to the hall of the dying, which was always difficult. And at my touch, they grew quiet and they breathed easy. Some did not open their eyes again. Only one man, who had been in unbearable pain because a Karkat disease dread clutched him with his dread claws, grabbed my hand and touched it to his forehead, whispering that word again, goddess. I'm no goddess, I said to him sadly, otherwise I would have saved you. But he was gone already, a faint smile lingering on the edge of his lips. I closed his eyes, sighed, and turned to leave. I was late for my secret lesson in the martial arts. Though I never would have confessed this to my family for fear of hurting them, I often wondered where I had come from, because what called to me most powerfully were the forests that I could see from the palace turrets. Rain cloud colored, mysterious, full of stories. They pushed up against our kingdom from every side. No one in my family felt the way I did about forests. Shatananda, my father's chief advisor, distrusted them deeply, the forests and the Rakshasas who lived in them. He was a little obsessed by Rakshasas, our Shatananda. He spoke often about how fierce and wild they were, not like humans. They bred in darkness and practiced dark magic. They loved to feed on human flesh. They were watching us, he claimed, waiting to take us over. He was always trying to get my peaceful father to line our borders with sentinels, to cut back the woods. Have you ever seen a Rakshasa? I once asked him. He refused to dignify my disbelief with an answer. Instead, he sent my father a look, this is what happens when you don't discipline girls as you ought to be. I wasn't sure whether Shatananda was right about Rakshasas, but I was certain he didn't understand forests. I wanted to visit a forest someday, though I didn't think I'd ever be granted the opportunity. It wasn't something that women did. Even my mother, the most intelligent person I knew, would have been baffled if I confessed this desire to her. I knew would have been Even my mother would have been baffled, I'm sure. So I satisfied myself by standing on the terrace on monsoon afternoons, watching the silvery rain bathing the top of the distant trees. Lightning cracked open the sky, spilling its longing into me. Sometimes I dreamt that I was walking the wilderness with its swaying grasses, its leaping golden beasts, the Earth Mother the way she had been before people bent her to their desires. The forest dream wasn't the only one I had. At other times, a wide expanse of water came to me in my sleep, stretching to the horizon, filled with tremendous waves. Wind roared over it, and beneath its surface, huge amphibious monsters waited, ready to pull anyone who ventured close into their dark depths. The scene terrified and excited me at the same time. Once, when I told my mother about it, she said I must have dreamt of an ocean. Did you ever take me to see one when I was little? I asked. No, she said, there aren't any oceans near Mithila. Even our songs don't mention them. I've never seen one myself, only read of them in books. I wonder where that dream came from. She kissed my head happily, but I could feel her watching me perplexed. I knew the real question in her mind. I wonder where you came from. So, my martial arts lessons, which I loved, were secret because my father abhorred violence of any kind, even when it was necessary. My mother had to force him to rally our troops when every once in a while our neighbors took advantage of his peace loving nature and encroached on our territory. She was in some ways a real ruler of Mithila, sharp of intellect, clear of vision, balancing kindness with justice. Often, my father brought particularly thorny problems of the state to her. They would discuss the issues in their bedchamber late into the night, and next day he would do as she counseled. But she never let anyone outside the immediate family know of this. Soon after I told her about my ocean dream, my mother asked me if I would like lessons in self defense. I was surprised but delighted. I loved the idea of being a warrior. I asked if Urmila would be joining me. I was very fond of my sister, though she was quite different from me, always wanting to play with dolls and dress up in mother's jewelry and entertain the daughters of our ministers or visiting dignitaries. No, she said. Why me then? I asked. I sense that your future is going to be different from that of most princesses. She said, it might take you to dangerous places where you'll need to defend yourself. But let's keep it a secret. I happily agreed. Every day for the next few years, mysterious women from the hills that surrounded our city came one by one, veiled against curious eyes, to my mother's personal courtyard to teach me. They didn't train me in the use of weapons, but what they taught was better. How the body itself could become a weapon, how the opponent's body, its weight, its awkwardness, its ignorance of your strategy could be used against him. I learned to move like a panther on the hunt, to run and leap and climb in silence, to fall the right way without injury, to accept pain when it came. The woman didn't spare me, and I often ended my lessons with bruises and aching muscles, sometimes a sprain, but they would massage me with unfamiliar herbal oils afterwards so that my hurts disappeared. And as I grew older, they taught me how to make these oils. My mother was our only spectator. She watched in silence, neither praising nor chiding nor expressing concern. Today, when after a strenuous fight I backed my teacher into a corner and kicked out her feet from under her, forcing her to raise her hands in surrender, Queen Sunena smiled. She hugged me to her, sweat and all, and said, now I'm as much at ease as a mother can be, sending her daughter out into the wild world. Her words sent a shiver through me, part excitement, part fear. I'm not going anywhere, Ma, I said, hugging her back, letting the smells of jasmine in her hair wash over me. I'm going to stay with you always. But we both knew that was wishful thinking. Girlhood was as ephemeral as a drop of water on a lily pad. Soon I'll have to leave all that I loved, parents, sister, palace garden, the healing house, to take my place in another family, which I must then call mine. That is a lot of daughters, commoner, or princess. So there it was for you. That was the book by Chitra Banerjee Divarkunni. Whoever is coming in now, you're a little late here. I started actually earlier than I intended, which is at 7:30. 7:45 or so, even though I meant to start only by 8, and so I'm almost done here now. So see you and goodbye. Tomorrow we'll either do a book or we will do a meditation. Mostly it's like Monday to Saturday around 8 p.m. Indian time evening we do meditations, and Sunday alone is reserved for a book. But sometimes in between the week, instead of a meditation, I might just choose a book or reading of something. Goodbye and see you.